to Pilot Lounge. I'm Paul Harp here in my dining room, nice and socially isolated, but connected over FaceTime is one of my favorite coworkers, Jill Tallman. Hey, Jill.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, so we get to talk to a lot of interesting people, but when we were looking at the list of who we wanted to have on this, I said Jill's got to be on one. Jill, you have a really interesting story as to how you came to aviation. Tell us how you got into flying.
Well, nobody in my family is a pilot. I'm the first. And basically, what happened is I was working, commuting to Washington, and loved that job. And then I had proceeded to have a couple children and decided I couldn't do that commute anymore. And AOPA has always been a really good employer in the Frederick area, so I decided to see if I could get in the door there, and I was able to come in the door as an editorial assistant, and still not a pilot. The One of the things that when you join AOPA as an employee, one of the things that you get to do is you get to go for a ride in a small airplane. Paul, you probably remember this.
Yeah, I actually never went on my introductory ride. I just started right into lessons because I knew I wanted to do it.
Oh, okay. Well, trust you to, be the overachiever.
Well,
But anyway,
it only took me
my
7 years to finish the pilot certificate, so don't call me too much of an overachiever.
my first flight was in a Cessna 172 with someone who worked for the then Air Safety Institute, and we did a little flight over to Martinsburg and back. And I just remember thinking, I was sitting up front for the first leg, and I just remember digging my fingers into the instrument panel because I had never felt. I mean, I'd been on jets and stuff, but I'd never been on a general aviation airplane, and so the whole, it just felt. I'm sure there wasn't that much wind, but it just felt like so much wind, and so much turbulence, and so I was kind of like, okay, I did that. Um, I started out working on AOPA Pilot as an editorial assistant, and I would be proofreading Never Again, and I would think, gosh, why does anybody want to get in these little airplanes? Fortunately for me, I was switched over to Flight Training magazine. And as you know, flight training is a much more casual, accessible publication. It's aimed at student pilots.
We're trying
Less
to get
scary.
people into the fold, not scare them into not doing dumb things yet.
Exactly. It's much less scary, less doom and gloom. And so I started, reading the copy, and particularly, and I've never told him this until now, but particularly Greg Brown's Flying Carpet. I would read that, and I would think, this sounds like fun. This sounds like something I can do. And at the time, and as you know, we had a very generous training program at AOPA. At the time when I was starting lessons, we only had the one airplane, so you could go anywhere and take your training, and you would be reimbursed as you went along. You'd be reimbursed 75% of your costs, and then you would get the remaining 25% when you finished, which is an incredibly generous program.
Sure.
And I would have been, foolish not to take advantage of it. So I decided to go ahead and strike out and go to a flight school. I chose Frederick Flight Center here in Frederick. The trainer I first flew was a Tampico TB9, which they don't have any more of those on the line, but they were great little airplanes, and I kind of wish that Cicada still made them.
So talk about your early flight training. You went from kind of editing the copy of the stuff where people have done dumb pilot tricks to, hey, maybe this is something I want to do. What was the first few lessons like once you were getting into the groove of things?
A little intimidating. I was 40 when I started. When you're 40, things don't come as quickly as they do when you're 20, 15 and 20. But at the same time, so it was a little intimidating, but at the same time, I never felt like, oh, I'm just over my head and there's no way I can do this. You have your flight instructor sitting right there.
Yeah.
And he or she is not going to let you mess up because he or she does not want you to get hurt any more than you want to get hurt. So that's a huge confidence builder when you think about it.
So you got the private, you finished that, knocked that out. What were the first couple years like? How do you use that certificate for the first little bit?
Oh gosh, well, a lot of people recommend and quite smartly, I think. A lot of people recommend, just dive right into the instrument training, and I thought about that, but I decided to give myself a year of fun flying, where I would just get really comfortable with, short cross countries and flying around and stuff. And a year turned into 5 years. So I eventually did get my instrument rating, but it was not in a year. It was a little further down the line.
So moving forward, you eventually ended up buying an airplane. Tell me about the process of making that decision and finding the right airplane and kind of the mechanics of how you make that happen.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was fortunate. My financial situation changed a little bit, and I was able to get a hold of I had a budget. I had a roughly $30,000 budget that I was working with, and so I knew that I had to work within those confines. At first, I wanted a tail dragger, like a rag and cloth tail dragger, but I knew I wouldn't probably have access to a hangar, so that I set that aside. I also thought about an air coupe, and then I thought, well, gee, if I have an air coupe, I won't be able to take anybody with me, except for my dog. so, so even though I love air coupes, I set that one aside. So that left me with, 172s and Piper Cherokees, and it really wasn't hard to decide on a Cherokee 140. I had, after they took the Tampicos off the line at Frederick Flight Center, they had Archers, Piper Archers, and Piper Warriors that I transitioned to. It was a very easy transition. I love low wing aircraft, so the Cherokee 140 was what I settled on, and it was a very good choice for a first time owner. Very simple, very easy to maintain, and affordable. 10 years ago anyway. Uh,
Well, so you got the keys to your very own airplane. Now what?
oh my gosh. Now what? Well, you go places and you do things and you make friends and you go visit your friends. Your friend who lives in Lynchburg, Virginia, and that's like a 6 hour car ride, and all of a sudden it's 2.5, 3 hours in an airplane. And my friends in North Carolina, I went to a family reunion in South Carolina that I never would have gone to because that would have been an 8 to 10 hour, car ride if it weren't for the airplane.
So, what were the biggest takeaways from having purchased an airplane? Like, I don't own an airplane. I've got a bucket list of things I'd like to do. I have all this anticipation of wanting to get one. What would you tell me to experience or to expect to experience throughout that process of owning it?
Well, the thing I would tell you, Paul, is something that I knew before buying my airplane, but I did not listen to that little voice. And is this: try to get an airplane equipped the way you want it, instead of buying an airplane and then upgrading. That is what I did with my Cherokee 140. It was not the most basic airplane, but I got it, and as I was going places and doing things, I decided I needed a moving Mac GPS, which it did not have. So I got that, and some other things. It needed shoulder belts, because back in the '60s when it was made, lap belts were de rigueur, and but now we know that shoulder
Yeah.
belts are better. So I had to put those in. So I would say, if you are wedded to a certain type of avionic or you are wedded to certain types of safety enhancements, then, by all means, try to find an airplane where the previous owner has made that expense so that you don't have to.
For sure. So you took I think, a bucket list trip that many of us have in mind. You went down to the Bahamas in your very own airplane. Tell me about that. That was a beautiful trip to see pictures from.
Oh, yes. So I had been to the Bahamas with a group of general aviation airplanes 5 years ago, and I could not wait to do it again myself. And so in December of 2018, I put all the pieces together and I invited a friend of mine to come along. She's also an owner, she has a Grumman Tiger. And that was great because I had somebody to keep me company because it was, from Maryland down to Florida, that's a bit of a hike. And so I always enjoy having somebody in the right seat to spot traffic and to talk to. And so we flew down, we spent the night, okay, I'm blanking on when we spent the night in South Carolina, and I'm blanking on where, but it was beautiful. And we got seafood. And then we went down to Fort Lauderdale. I picked the Banyan FBO to stage out of because they are super nice people and they're very experienced in Bahama crossings. And, they just know all the answers. I was able to rent a raft there. Um, and aside from the intimidation of flying into Fort Lauderdale, that was probably the hardest part of the whole trip.
Not the 80 miles over water.
No, it goes by really quick. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't listen to the engine real close, but when you go from there and you land at Grand Bahama, it's really not that long, so you don't really have time to think about it.
Would you have ever imagined landing your own airplane at Grand Bahama 15, 20 years ago when you were making that DC commute?
Oh God, no. General aviation has just opened up so many wonderful doors for me. I have been so many places that I would never have had the opportunity to go to, and quite frankly, never would have thought that there would be a reason to go to. Um, General aviation has just been a huge gift to me.
So you went from not a pilot to aircraft owner, and then you made the decision to sell the airplane and move into a partnership. Was that a difficult thing to part with your baby that you've had for all those years? Talk me through that thought process and what it's like to sell your very first airplane.
Well, yes, and was it difficult? Yes and no. Ironically, it was the Bahamas trip that made me realize that the kind of trips that I wanted to do, my airplane was just not all that suited for them. We went down to Florida and we spent the night, because it took like 6 hours to go so far and I get tired, so I thought, and then I thought about, more horsepower and this and the other. I thought this airplane is great for 98% of the things I like to do, but and it has served me very well. But now I really want to start going places, and I really want to go places and not spend all day getting there. Um, and so I decided to start thinking about selling the airplane. And once I had made that decision, things kind of moved pretty quickly. The market was really, really, really hot at the time, and I reached out to a broker because this was new to me, and I didn't want to try to, get on Barnstormers or trade a plane and without having somebody with a knowledge set behind me to help me with this. So
Sure.
I did reach out to a broker, and that was probably the best thing I ever did.
So how does that process work? You find the broker, they list the airplane, and they do all the dirty work for you, or do you have to still get involved with anything? How does it work once you involve a broker?
I had very little to do. I had to take some pictures, some logbook entries and things like that. He actually flew. The broker flew out to the airport and did a very close look at what the airplane had to offer, so how he could frame the ad. We talked about the price that he thought I should ask versus the price that I thought I should ask for. Um, and the market was so hot that he had he had cash offers the day that the ad went up.
Wow.
And I didn't even have to, nobody even came and did a test flight of it. He had a cash offer, and the deal was done within a couple of weeks.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that's
And
sounds like a less painful of a process than I'd always imagined it would have been.
oh, exactly. And I know that there are a lot. I mean, you and I have colleagues that they sell airplanes all the time, and I think they kind of enjoy the back and forth with people, and that's great if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But for somebody like me, a broker was definitely the way to go.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, some people have that skill of transaction. I don't think I would have it either. So good to hear what the broker process made it a little bit easier. So now you're in a partnership. How's that going? It's not all your airplane anymore. You got to share.
It is
Is that
not.
difficult?
It's not difficult, but it was a change of a mental change, mindset change, because you go from having an airplane that's it's all yours. It's the way you left it, where you left it, and it's there, and it'll be there when you open up the hangar doors, and it'll be there when you close the hangar doors. And now you don't have that anymore. I have six partners. They're great people. I feel very lucky to be part of the partnership that I'm in. They're conscientious, and they don't want to skimp on maintaining the airplane, which I feel is important. Um, I have to work around their schedules, and they have to work around mine. But we use Flight Schedule Pro, and that makes it really simple. Um, I have to make sure, I'm the kind of person that might leave the seatbelts unfastened, kind of thing. Now I got to make sure the seatbelts are all fastened and everything is exactly the way it needs to be for the next person. So that only makes me a better aircraft owner.
Sure, sure. Well, what would you tell somebody? We always ask for advice to give to people that want to do this. What advice do you give to somebody that has no idea yet that they may want to become a pilot?
Wow. No idea yet. I would say that becoming a pilot will change your life in ways that almost nothing else will. And for that reason alone, you owe it to yourself to give it a try and to take it as far as you can. I mentioned that general aviation has been a gift to me. It has given me so many things. It has made me a much more confident person. Um, there was a time, I'm not a person who gets up and talks in front of big groups of people, but now I do that from time to time for the organization, and it doesn't bother me so much because, I put it in perspective. I think, if you can fly an airplane, you can talk to a group of 50 people. So.
I get that. I get that. Well, Jill Tallman, thank you so much for letting me catch up with you here. I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the office whenever it's safe for us too. But thanks for sharing your flying journey, and hopefully we'll inspire some other people.
My pleasure.